These notes are for 8-3, factoring x squared plus bx plus c, or another way to say that is factoring a trinomial. How do you factor a trinomial when a equals 1? So when the leading coefficient is 1, I'm going to show you some methods on how to factor a trinomial. Recall multiplying binomials. Notice that when you multiply x plus 2 times x plus 5, the constant term in the trinomial is the product of the constants in the binomials. So notice that if we have 2 and 5 here, when you multiply those two numbers, you get the constant 10. And notice that when we add the two numbers, when we add 2 and 5, we end up getting the 7x. So knowing that information is going to help us factor a trinomial in this form. There are a few methods to learn when multiplying trinomials, and the method that we're going to use is called the x method. So we will use the x method to factor trinomials in the form x squared plus bx plus c when a equals 1. And you might be wondering, what do I mean when a equals 1? Well, technically there's an A in front. In your textbook there's not for this section, but there definitely is an A there, and the A equals 1 in this case, which is why in your textbook they don't write the A term there. So this is called the standard form of a trinomial, and it's going to come in handy when we move on to chapter 9 because we're going to have to use these coefficients. So make sure you know it always goes ax squared plus bx plus c. So when we use the x method, what you're going to add to goes up top, and what you're going to multiply to goes in the bottom of the x. We practice using some x's in class right before this lesson is due. Up top is what you're going to add to, and remember that's always the middle term. Remember the last example that we just went through. And then what we're going to multiply to is always the constant or last term. And so what's going to go here on either side are factors of c, but there's sum of b. And this is going to help us to put it into factor form. It's going to look like this once we're done. Plus or minus will go in the middle. Your variable will go here. And then what goes here would be those question marks from your x method. The videos for this section are really short. There's only one video, and I'm going to go through 3 examples. And for each example, where you're going to factor each trinomial, and then on your own, you need to multiply and check your answer to make sure you get the original trinomial back. Okay, and so we got 3 examples, and then that is the only video for the section of notes for 8-3. So let's begin. We're going to use the x method. So I'm going to draw my x. What I'm going to add to goes up top. What I multiply to goes in the bottom. What I add to is always the middle term here, so I always sum up to the b term. And my c term, my constant, is going to be 24, so this is what I'm multiplied to. So I'm going to show you some strategies to help you. The best thing to do is to always write out your factors of c. So we're going to write factors of 24, and you're just going to list them. So think of factors of 24. The easiest one is always 1 times 24, and then there's 2 times 12. And there's going to be 8 times 3. And can you think of any other factors of 24? Okay, good. Yeah, there's one more. What about 4 times 6? 4 times 6 equals 24 as well. So this looks like it's all our factors of 24. And now we're going to have to choose a pair of factors that would give us a sum of 10. So take a look at our list. What do you think would give us a sum of 10? And if you said 4 times 6, you're correct. When I multiply, I get 24, but when I add, I get the 10. So I'm going to put 4 and 6 here, and then again, you could check. Add those two, you get the 10. Multiply those two, you get 24. And so now our factored form of the trinomial will be x plus 4. I'm using x because x was used in our trinomial, and I'm putting positive 4 because this is a positive 4. And then multiplied by x plus 6. Once again, a positive 6. And here is our answer in its factored form of the trinomial. So now, in order for you to check your work, you probably want to end up using the box method to check your answer. Remember, x and 4, x and 6. Multiply and get the inside. I'll put question marks because you need to check that on your own. And make sure that this answer is correct. So all 3 examples are different types. The last example was when you have 2 positives, and this example here is when you have 1 negative in the top. So let me go in and fix my slide. There we go. Okay, let's go ahead and factor this trinomial using the x method. I'll draw my x. What I add to goes up top, and this time it's going to be negative 13. So the sum needs to be negative 13. And what I'm going to multiply to is positive 40. And that's my C term. And now I'll go ahead and list my factors of 40. Notice it's always the constant. Factors of 40. So we have 10 times 4, 2 times 20, 8 times 5. And can you think of any other factors of 40? Good. Neither can I. So I think that's it. Oh, yep. I forgot one more. It's always the easiest one, but we always forget it. 1 times 40. So now let's take a look. We're going to see if we can get the sum or difference for negative 13. So let's take a look. If I had, I'm just going to put negatives here. If I had negative 10 plus negative 4, would I get negative 13? No, so that's not a choice. Let's say if I make both of these negative, or at least one negative, could I get negative 13? Nope. Even if the 2 was positive and the 20 was negative, I would get negative 18, and that's too large. I need negative 13. Let's look at 8 and 5. What if I make one negative? No, my answer would be too small. But if I make both negative and I add those two together, I would get negative 13. So this is the pair of factors that I want. So now I'm going to go ahead and write negative 8 and negative 5. And now we could check that if you add these two together, you would end up getting negative 13. And if you multiply these two together, you would get positive 40, right? Negative times negative is positive. So these factors work. Now I'll have x minus 8 multiplied by x minus 5. And I just factored the trinomial. So once again, remember you're going to need the check. You could also do the distributive property. Distribute x to the x and to the negative 5. And then negative 8 to the x and negative 8 to negative 5. And you should get back this trinomial to check your answer. So we're averaging about 2 minutes for these examples. Let's go through the last example. Notice that now I have a negative for the constant. So what I'm going to add to is positive. Ooh, that's kind of weird. It's just an x. But remember, b is in front of x, and it's invisible, so it's an invisible 1. And then what I'm going to multiply to needs to be negative 20. So that means for sure one of my factors will have to be negative, so my answer is negative 20 for the factors. So let's list our factors of negative 20, or just 20. And you get 2 times 10, 4 times 5, 1 times 20. And can you think of any other factors of 20? I can't. And let's go and take a look at our list. So let's look at 2 and 10. So 1 definitely has to be negative. And since I want to get a sum of positive 1, then the larger number has to be positive. So let's make the 2 negative. And notice if I add these two together, I would get positive 8. And that does not give me the positive 1. Let's take a look at 4 and 5. Remember, I want to make the 4 negative so that I can get a positive answer that's higher. And let's see, if I add these two together, they're different signs. So I subtract, keep the sign of the bigger number, and I would get positive 1. So this is my factors that would work. So let's go ahead and check. Put it here, negative 4 and 5. So negative 4 plus 5 is positive 1. And negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. And this works. So we'll write it in our factored form. X minus 4 multiplied by x plus, because that's a positive, 5. And if you check your answer, which you need to in your notes, you will see that you would get the trinomial back. Okay, so double check your work for all 3 examples. If some of the examples are difficult, you're really confused as how I picked my correct factors, rewatch it because I explain why I choose each pair of factors for each example. And bring any questions you have to class tomorrow.